Good day, students. We're going to look at a solution now to one of the multiple choice, which is part of your sample quiz at the end of chapter 1. Okay, your sample quiz, the end of chapter 1. You should have tried this quiz already inside D2L. If you haven't, you should go try it. This is the solution to number 9, and it's one of the more tricky ones, but let's go through it. So we're given an endpoint of a segment AB, segment AB. One endpoint is -2, 4. Then we're given the coordinates of the midpoint. So the midpoint is -4, +6. I'm going to call that letter M. Okay, so M for midpoint. And what we're asked to find is the coordinates of B. Now B is the other endpoint. So we have this other endpoint. We don't know the coordinates X and Y. So that's what we're trying to find, the coordinates of the other endpoint. Alright, let's think through it logically now. So if we had a segment, okay, let me just sketch a segment here. So if I had a segment, alright, AB, right? So we go back to our pen. So let's say we know the coordinates of A, and the coordinates of A are -2, +4. We don't know the coordinates of B on the other end, okay? So I'll put question mark, and in the middle is, somewhere in the middle is M, right? Oops, call it M. And we know that's the midpoint, so these are equal. And the coordinates of M, -4, 6, so we know that. Now, if we think just logically, now it's not drawn correctly, right? We know that these are not in right position as they would be on a coordinate grid. But just looking at this, we know this distance here has to be the same as this distance here, right? We know these are equal. So if I go from -2 up to, or to the left, actually, because I'm going from -2 to -4, that's a distance of 2, right? And if I want to do the same thing, I want to go from -4 up to, because it had to be equal, not up to, I have to go left, because this is -2 to -4, which is left. -4, 2 more units to the left of that would have to be what? That, right? -6. So you can see that the answer here, the x coordinate is going to be -6. Now using the same logic, very same logic, I go from 4 to the right. I go, again, it's also 2 units. Look at that. No, they're not always the same. I'm going to go 2 units more this way. So 4 up to 6, 2 units. Right? Then 6 up to what? 2 units. Just add 2 to 6, and of course you would get 8. So that's one way to look at it. So there's your answer right there, -6, 8. Now, lots of people don't do that method, or they don't like that method, for whatever reason. Okay, so well, how else could you do it? Well, you could actually get a piece of graph paper and do it, right? Now, if you had a piece of graph paper, now I'll just sketch it roughly, but if you had a piece of scrap paper, right, you could easily just draw your XY coordinates or grid and put them in, and then count it off, right? So if I put in A is -2, +4. So here's A right here. -2, +4. Alright, now the midpoint M is at -4, so 2 more, and -6, up 2 more here. So there's M right here. Now if I join those two, right, if I join those two, there's half of my segment. Right? Now, so where would the other one have to be? Would I go in this direction? Down here? No, that doesn't make sense. M is the midpoint. It has to go in the other direction. So it has to go this way. So it's somewhere right here. Now if you're on a piece of graph paper, you could count that right off. And it turns out to be -6, 8. Right? So, you know, you can judge that accordingly. So that's another way to look at it, piece of graph paper and do it. However, most people use the formula to do it, and we'll do that. Now we know the midpoint formula. Let's grab it here. You should know the midpoint formula. I'll write MID for midpoint. You add up your 2 x's, right? add up your two x coordinates, x2, divide by 2, add up your two y coordinates, divide by 2, gives you the y coordinate, right, of the midpoint. Now we know these values already. What is this value here? What is the x coordinate of the midpoint? We know that. That's -4. So x1 plus x2 divided by 2 is -4. We already know. And by the same logic, we know that y1 plus y2, right, divided by 2 is the y coordinate, right? So y1 plus y2 over 2 is equal to 6. Now, how does that help us solve? Well, just plug it in, cross multiply. So remember now, we got a, which is -2, 4. We have b, which we don't know, so I'll call it x. Just call it x and y. Now if I'm using these as my formula, right, so I'll call this one, say x1, I'll call this one y1. That means this must be x2 and y2. I'll plug them in. So x1 is x plus -2, right, x2, all over 2 equals -4. Now this is understood to be over 1. Just simple cross multiply. We get x plus -2 equals -8. Add 2 to both sides, right, and we get x equals -6. See, there's the x coordinate of the other endpoint. And we simply repeat that process over here, right? y1 I got called y. y2 is 4. All divided by 2 equals 6. So I'm just substituting here for 4, right, here for y1, right? So then I cross multiply again. I get y plus 4 equals 12. Subtract 4 from both sides, and that will give us 8. So the coordinates of point B is -6, +8, which of course is D. There's your answer. 3 different ways.